First of all, it wasn't a half hour, it was an hour. You weren't supposed to be funny in that. Hours were serious, half hours were funny.
What did you call me?
Sissy fighter. I wish you could have seen yourself. Did anyone ever teach you how to throw a real punch?
Moonlighting was always so intense that it was hard to tell one intensity from another.
Stick around. There's going to be another murder.
People, cut!
I think I was 26 at the time, and ABC came to me and said, we want to make an arrangement with you. And it was a very innovative arrangement. They said, we want you to create a company, and we'll finance that company, and you'll make television programs directly for our network. And I was too young and too naive to even understand the enormity of what they were proposing, but I had an attorney who was very bright and said, this is a great thing. And so we entered into this agreement, and the nature of the agreement was that we would do 3 two-hour television movie pilots.
Moonlighting was our third pilot. We did 2 pilots that didn't sell. But I remember sitting in Jaime's Fish Market with Glenn, and we had just heard that Long Time Gone, our second pilot, wasn't going to make the grade. And ABC had asked him to do a detective show.
A gentleman from ABC came to me and said, okay, you have 1 show left and we're going to tell you what to do. I said, what do you mean? They said, we want you to make, and they called it a boy-girl detective show. I said, oh my God, you've gone to the wrong guy. I hate those things. They said, no, we want something like Heart to Heart. We'll get a girl like Cheryl Ladd, a blonde, and we'll find some guy who looks good in a tux, and that's the show you're going to do. And I said, really, you've come to the wrong guy. I have no interest in doing that. I had done it very briefly on Remington Steele, and somewhat against my will when I did it then. They said, well, that's what you're doing. We don't care what you do with it, but that's what you're doing. And all I heard was, we don't care what you do with it.
And that was the beginning of it. He left there. I'm sure he sort of debated because I think he was disappointed the other shows hadn't gone, and he really didn't want to do the conventional show because he doesn't know how to do conventional stuff.
Glenn and I had worked on 2 other unsold pilots, so we knew each other very well. I had tremendous respect for his writing and could tease him about some of it. So the relationship was excellent, and when it came along, it was one in a series of inevitabilities.
In the description, initially, I was reminded of Remington Steele, and thought, well, he can obviously write that sort of thing, and it would be a change of pace. And I loved working with him, and Bob was going to direct, so, I said, of course. And I remember in his description of it, you never really got what he was going for. And when I read it, I thought, well, this is really different.
About halfway through writing the pilot, when it occurred to me that I was probably writing Sybil Shepherd. I mean, I had a really strong image of her in my head, less so from Last Picture Show, curiously, which for me didn't loom as large as Taxi Driver, and also The Heartbreak Kid.
I was very impressed with Glenn, and, I was curious, because he said to me that when he started writing the script, that he just started thinking about me for the part, and then he figured, well, why not try to get me? My agent said to me, I have 50 pages of a script. I know it's not the whole thing, but I want you to read it, because you might just really like it. I read it, loved it, and went to meet him, he and Jay Daniel. And
we had a meeting at a restaurant that no longer exists called Le Serre, which was a very fancy French restaurant, the kind of place that intimidated the hell out of me back then, in the Valley. And Jay Daniel loves to tell the story that she walked in and my chin hit the table, and I said something intelligent like hamada, hamada, hamada. She looked at me and said, it's a Hawksian comedy. I had absolutely no idea what that meant. And of course she was referring to Howard Hawks.
Then I explained to him about certain movies that have inspired me, that I had almost studied religiously, like that Hawks had directed Bringing Up Baby, His Girl Friday, and I suggested that we see these movies because Glenn was already writing this incredibly fast repartee that was so wonderful, like what's in so many of the Hawks movies.
Unlike any other show, our scripts were twice as long as the average episodes on television, and I think a lot of people didn't understand that, perhaps at the network standpoint at first.
It had to be fast-paced. I mean, it was really a densely written show in that way, and so we had to keep going at a clip, which is fine for me. As you can see, I talk very fast anyway, and I'd only been out of New York for a year, so No problem. This is slow for me.
City of Angels Investigations. Lost or stolen property, our specialty. You dropped it, we'll spot it. He cheats, we'll peek. Little one gone, we'll find him before dawn.
When I first saw the rhyme in the pilot, and again, there was not that much, Mr. Pester didn't have that many, you know, I'm not complaining, she just didn't have that many scenes to explore, especially in the pilot in the first year. So the rhymes were it, and I thought, what kind of person rhymes on the phone?
It seemed like when we were doing the pilot that everybody was talking 3 times as fast as you normally would in real life, you know. And now, looking back and viewing the pilot again from a distance and knowing the episodes that we did subsequently, the pilot actually seems a little slow compared to what the episodes were.
What are you angry about?
Why am I angry?
I heard the kids singing when you came in out there. Good golly, they think you are the greatest boss in the world.
And then when you're through rotting in jail, you're gonna rot in hell.
We fixed up for you out there, mauve,
I want it
one of my
back.
favorite colors.
Now!
There was an evolution. There was something different going on while editing this series that set it apart from every other show on television. And what we learned in the editing room was that the only rule that exists was that there are absolutely no rules.
I had never really worked on a television show. I had done a couple of scripts for Taxi. I worked briefly on Remington Steele, so I didn't know what the rules were. So it wasn't as if I was consciously like breaking rule. I truly didn't know what they were. I never really thought or imagined that the shows would A, get on television or be sustained for any length of time. I was just sort of giddy at the idea that we could go make a movie.
The music came to me from the pen of Holdridge, Lee Holdridge, and beautiful music. So when he called me, I was like, yeah, what? Yeah, what? And he said to me, look, this is just a pilot, Al. We don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be a situation kind of comedy, great mix with Sybil Shepherd, and I hear papers rattling. He's looking for the guy's name, the co-star. I hear papers rattling, and Bruce Willis. Yeah, okay, Bruce Willis.
We had it was one of the most exhaustive and most extensive casting searches, probably at least at that time I'd ever been involved in, and I'd done a lot of searches. I'd cast 2 other pilots for Glenn Caron. So Glenn had given me what was his prototype of, you know, if this was a theatrical motion picture, it would have been Jessica Lange and Bill Murray.
I actually remember an ABC executive at the time saying, Bill Murray has a movie career. I mean, that was sort of their take on it. We're never going to find anyone to fill this role.
When I walked into that room, when I went into audition, I said, I took one look at these guys sitting at this table, and I said, I ain't getting this job.
Bruce comes in and he has the scenes and he hops on the top of the counter.
He just came into the interview and took over, absolutely took over.
I turned to the other people in the room and I started to say, oh my God, blah, blah. And they thought I was talking about the guy before him. And I said, well, go get him, go get him, go get him. And no one knew who I was talking about, so I ran outside. He was walking down, we were on Pico Boulevard at that point. Right. Walking down, and I said, come back, come back, come back, come back, come back. And he came back in the room and I said, can you meet me at wardrobe tomorrow? Because he literally, all his hair was off, he had earrings, he was wearing battle fatigues.
I'd cut my own hair, I'd cut my own hair with
camouflage. And this is 1984, you know.
I was way ahead of California fashion.
And what's interesting is that show set a new standard for casting. So the next season, when I was being hired for pilots, at that point, the hardest thing to find is a young leading man between 30 and 35 who can do comedy, who can do comedy and who also has an edge. And Bruce became the prototype for the next pilot season.
Where on earth did you get those glasses?
Oh, these? X-ray specs. Pretty cool, huh? You must be wearing a lead dress. I can't see a thing.
We had Sybil. Sybil had committed pretty much on half a script. And I very much wanted Bruce. He was the only guy I brought to the network. And I realized the only way I was going to convince them was to do a screen test with the 2 of them. And Sybil wouldn't screen test. Not because she didn't want Bruce, but because
she was Sybil Shepherd.
And she confessed to me that she was terrified that if I saw her on film, I'd take the part away. So she refused to do it. So I then went about casting for someone to do the screen test with Bruce.
Rolling. Mark?
Who's the geek on your sofa? Relax. I just came by to return my company cars and tell you I think you're making a big mistake closing down the City of Angels investigation.
Then
to us. To our friendship, to our agency, to another year.
There was a certain point in time where we sort of became the fair-haired boy in terms of we were their hit.
Hi, I'm Madeline Hayes, and this is David Addison.
Right.
And we'd just like to take a minute or two before the show starts to welcome you back to another season of Moonlighting.
I wasn't much interested in doing 22 of anything. If I couldn't do them well, I was much more interested in doing what I did well. I had figured out sort of the dirty secret of television at that moment, which was enormous profits were being made. So some of that could certainly be plowed back into the making of the show.
This was basically a network show. So we did things both from from a financial standpoint that most episodic shows couldn't do.
We'd have these execs just hawking the hell out of Glenn. All they're worried about, the execs are worried about the numbers, the money.
I remember giving this lecture to the executives at ABC, because they were very upset we were spending all this, until the show became an enormous hit, which it did fairly quickly, but we were spending all this money, and I said, but here's the thing, I said, you'll spend all this money on our show, but you can run it 3 and 4 times and it'll still get a 30 share, and it did. I said, because there's so many jokes buried in it, you really need to watch it 2 or 3 times. It's like a Marx Brothers movie in the sense of the density of the jokes. And I really thought this made sense as an argument. I mean, I would say it to anybody who would listen. Why should all television shows cost the same amount of money? Why should they? Because back then that was the thing. If it was an hour, we pay you this much money to make the show. And I thought that was asinine. Our show costs more, and what's the problem?
The thing that they really had the most problem with was we weren't able to meet all our air dates. And I think there was more pressure about that than there was about the financial. I think if they had to choose between spend more money and get it on the air, they would have spent more money.
The show aired on Tuesday night. And on 1 or 2 occasions, I remember coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday and shooting a scene, or even 2 small scenes, for that episode that aired that night.
The story was that one week, I believe, we made the satellite feed by a half hour.
A lot of times, because we were so late, they would literally beam the show wet to the East Coast, and we would get away with a lot of stuff that at the time was pretty risque for TV.
Get your hand off my behind.
Is that your behind? Is that my hand? You know, that's what I like about this place. You learn something new every day.
Would you get serious?
Maddie, I just have my hand on your behind. If I get any more serious, they're going to move us to cable.
Sometimes there'd be delays in scripts and stuff like that. But as long as you kept going, ABC it never seemed to really bug us about... as long as we got the show done, it was okay, because the show was breaking new ground at the time. It was really, really breaking new ground.
I've been in downtown Los Angeles in a location where the script supervisor was on the telephone with Glenn in longhand writing down the scene, writing down the dialogue, and then would take it, and I think we had a copy machine at least on the truck, copy some of those pages and hand them out to the crew and hand them out to the cast, and they'd learn the scene and we'd go shoot it.
We were always behind schedule because we were shooting it really like a film. And so the way we would try to catch up time was the car shots.
Mom, will you read me a story before I go to bed?
I mean, if you look at the driving stuff, if you really want to look at them closely and have fun with them, watch how bad a job they both do of pretending to drive. Because they're so caught up in the scene, and it was a nightmare in the editing room because they're not driving. And when you got the performances that we did, the last thing you want to do is give them a note of, let's go back and do this scene again, but drive better. I mean, it's just a dumb note.
A lot of times we did have the script pasted across the dashboard so you couldn't see it. She never saw us reading it, though. Sad to think that an innocent person had to die just because she fell for the wrong guy.
Wait a second, wait a second. There's a page missing out of my copy of the script.
Classic Moonlighting. Just make fun of ourselves before somebody else can.
As a little girl, you were more of a door slammer, like your father.
Still am. And the slamming doors. The slamming doors was something that we had to rebuild the doors every season because I would slam them so hard.
Of course I'll step into your office.
The thing that I loved most, I think, about working on Moonlighting is that if we wrote a joke and let's say 20 million people were watching the show and it's like you'd think, okay, 12 million people will get this joke but 8 million won't, Glenn would say, it's great, throw it out, let's do it, let's put it in. when I worked on other shows, it's like, not everyone's going to get it, so we can't use it. And I think that's why it was so much fun. And, we just wrote everything we could think of.
That was all Glenn's doing. I mean, Glenn created the atmosphere. Glenn created the mold. And he said something that no one ever said in a sitcom to us, which is, what's the truth of the scene? Emotionally, what's it about? And things like, people don't care how you figured out who was the murderer. They care about what's going on between David and Maddie. That was the truth of the scene. That was a revelation to us, and that was something we took to heart then and ever since.
Anybody could have an idea. There was no real ego. Nobody had an ego. It's, this is my show, or that was another great thing about Jay and Glenn.
Working in the writing room at the beginning, it was a little scary because it was a completely new thing, but it was mostly a really thrilling thing because we sort of knew right away that we could try almost anything. We could try things that hadn't been tried before. That template was there.
When we did the black and white show, Dream Sequence Always Rings Twice, ABC originally pleaded with us not to film it in black and white. Film it in color, we'll take the color out. And I had enough experience at this point with the network to realize that was a fool's mission. So we literally went out and got the old cameras and the old film stock, and then discovered there was no lab in Hollywood that would develop it for us. Nobody wanted to take the liability. Finally, we were able to convince MGM Labs to develop this film in black and white. We put it together, and we knew we really had something special, but ABC was still terribly concerned that we were showing this black and white television show, in 1986.
Again, Glenn had so much balls to stand up to the network so many times to protect the show and to do things like that, because yes, it would have been so easy to do it in color and then say, well, we'll take the black and white out later, but it doesn't look the same.
And they felt that, like The Wizard of Oz, which was a movie that was shown in this country every year, and every year they went to great lengths to explain to people the first part is in black and white, the second part is in color, there's nothing wrong with your television set. ABC felt it was important for us to offer that kind of assurance to the audience. So we thought, well, who should do this? I don't know, again, it just cracked me up. Orson Welles, here's the man who probably made the most beautiful black and white film, ever. So I wrote this thing, which he ultimately said, about, very special monochromatic, blah, 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 moonlighting, so get grandma and the kids and lock them in the basement. And it was a pretty funny thing, and I called him up and said, would you be interested in doing this thing? And to my amazement, he said, well, I'll send it over. So I sent it over, and he called back and said, I think it's funny.
In this age of living color and stereophonic sound, the television show Moonlighting is daring to be different.
I met him October 4th, I remember, because it was my mother's birthday. And he passed away October 11th, just exactly 1 week later. And we took pictures, and I had my script with me, and I got his autograph. So right where it said, written by and our names, he signed it. And, that was just such a thrill.
I remember standing on the stage and saying, I'm actually here, and that's Orson Welles. And then I sort of felt something, and I looked around, and the stage had filled with people. Everybody very reverently, very silently had just sort of wandered in, standing in the shadows, watching Orson Welles. And I'll never forget that.
There was something about it. I thought it was very surreal, but most of my experience on Moonlighting was pretty surreal.